When people talk about POW survival during the Second World War, they usually reference the famous blanket trick, the method where prisoners dampened their blankets, wrung them out, then froze them into rigid slabs to block wind, reinforce walls, or add insulation. It's clever, and it worked. But it's only one small piece of a much broader story. POWs across Europe, Asia and the Pacific created an entire underground culture of improvisation, bartering, concealment and makeshift engineering that kept them alive in situations where the captors' intentions ranged from neglectful to openly lethal. This is the deeper side of POW survival. Techniques rarely emphasized in mainstream wartime narratives, but widely remembered by those who lived through captivity. One of the most important, though rarely discussed survival strategies was the management of calories. Rations in most camps, especially Japanese-run camps in Southeast Asia, were barely enough to keep a healthy man alive, let alone one performing forced labour. Prisoners learned quickly that survival depended not just on eating, but on rationing with precision. In many camps, men formed small food syndicates, usually groups of 5 or 6, who pooled everything: Red Cross parcels, smuggled grain, kitchen scraps, or items traded with guards. By cooking communally, they reduced waste and improved nutrition. A single tin of condensed milk might be split into daily teaspoons rather than eaten at once. It was a methodical, disciplined system. Veterans later admitted that without these syndicates, many more would have died, not from brutality, but from poor personal management of scarce food. Another overlooked survival tactic was clandestine sanitation. Disease killed POWs faster than violence. Dysentery, cholera and beriberi were omnipresent, especially in the Pacific. Soldiers learned to build improvised filters. In some Japanese camps, men used crushed charcoal, sand and layers of torn cloth to strain water that was technically safe by the guard standards, but dangerously contaminated by any rational measure. These filters weren't perfect, but they reduced illness significantly. European POWs, especially in German stalags, improvised crude toothbrushes from frayed twine or pine slivers and used ash as a mild abrasive to prevent gum infections that could turn deadly when untreated. It was this kind of quiet, constant improvisation that kept survival rates from collapsing. Then there were the communication networks, essential, risky, and often invisible in official histories. Information was a lifeline. Knowing the state of the war told prisoners of war whether to conserve strength for months or brace for the chaos of liberation. Prisoners improvised radios from scavenged parts, a razor blade and pencil lead in place of a detector, wire stripped from bed frames, condensers made from cigarette foil. The brilliance of these micro-radios was that they were often small enough to hide inside soap bars or beneath floorboards. The Germans searched constantly, but camp after camp still managed to maintain a trickle of BBC News. In Japanese camps, the risk was even greater. Possessing a radio was a death sentence. Yet survivors routinely recalled how a secret set, often hidden in a hollowed table leg, kept morale alive by proving the outside world hadn't forgotten them. Equally crucial was the informal medical system prisoners of war built behind the guards' backs. Many camps had only 1 or 2 trained medical officers, often with no supplies. Survival depended on ingenuity. Allied doctors in Burma used pieces of sharpened bamboo as surgical instruments when metal was unavailable. In German camps, prisoners of war boiled utensils and repurposed bootlaces as sutures. Simple antibiotics were nearly impossible to obtain, so prisoners learned fermentation techniques to produce crude, penicillin-like mold cultures. They weren't powerful, but they were better than nothing. These makeshift medical practices saved countless men, and they demonstrate how desperation forces innovation. Bartering was another essential method of staying alive. A prisoner of war camp had a full internal economy, small, fragile, but powerful. Cigarettes were the universal currency. Red Cross parcels, when they arrived, fueled a spike of trading activity. A bar of chocolate could buy food, information, or even favour with a guard. Skilled prisoners, cobblers, tailors, watch repairmen became valuable in the barter system, using their trades to secure better rations or protection. In German camps, some prisoners became adept at forging documents or crafting trinkets that guards would purchase unofficially. In Japanese camps, polished coconut shells or small carvings often served the same purpose. Survival wasn't just about physical strength, it was about economic adaptability. Environmental manipulation was another method rarely discussed. Prisoners of war learned to use the landscape itself. At Colditz, men funneled rainwater through cracks in roofs to create drip points for washing. In tropical camps, prisoners dug small underground cool pits to protect food from insects and spoilage. In northern climates, prisoners used snowbanks as communal refrigerators. These small adaptations allowed them to preserve precious food, avoid illness, and maintain routines that reinforce structure in an environment meant to break them. Psychological survival might be the least glamorous but most essential technique. Prisoners of war structured days around routines, morning roll call, cleaning tasks, exercise circuits, language lessons, even handmade theatrical productions. This wasn't entertainment. It was stabilization. Without routine, time dissolved, and men lost discipline, motivation, and hope. Guards sometimes banned these activities, seeing them as subversive. But prisoners found ways around those restrictions because they understood that morale was a survival tool every bit as vital as food or medicine. Taken together, these methods paint a more complete picture of prisoner of war survival. It wasn't one clever trick. It was thousands of small, disciplined decisions built from cooperation, ingenuity, and sheer human determination. Surviving captivity in the Second World War wasn't a matter of physical toughness alone. It was an intellectual battle fought in silence, with improvised tools and improvised hope. If you want more deep dives like this into the overlooked realities of wartime history, be sure to subscribe and share the channel. There's more coming.